behalf of our panel, I just do want to say thank you so much for attending our session. I think we have a fairly exciting and engaging conversation planned for you today, so hopefully you all will enjoy it and learn a little bit about transit-oriented affordable housing. My name is Pilar Lorenzana-Campo, and I am from an organization called the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California, or NPH for short. And really briefly, what NPH is, it's a membership organization of affordable housing developers, consultants, and advocates. So we advocate for affordable housing policy all around the 9-county Bay Area region. So throughout the day, many of you probably heard our keynote speaker throughout our sessions. We've been talking about this theme of healthy communities. So as you all are probably aware, and as I intimately am aware, being a person who lives in Oakland, access to transit-oriented affordable housing is really a key part of what a healthy and a just community looks like. So as we heard today, like many of the efforts that we're trying to undertake in transportation planning and in land use planning, this kind of development actually has many layers to it, and it requires a whole bunch of collaboration and coordination between different agencies and between different entities, and also at different levels of government. So what we're hoping to do today is to kind of demystify a little bit this concept of transit-oriented development and give you some practical advice about how to get this kind of development actually built in your community. And last but not the least, we want to leave you with some ideas for how to actually plug in to processes that are already going on right now across the region. So why is it important? Can everyone see this, or do you want me to shut the lights? Turn off the lights? Would you? Oh, it's this one. Okay. Here. Okay. All right. So this is really important because I passed out a few copies of this publication from the California Housing Partnership Corporation. It's relatively new, and according to this report, it says really that there are 1 million households in the state that do not have access to affordable housing. The state has experienced about a shortfall of around 960,000 homes, and between the years of 2000 and 2012, we've actually seen two events that have happened that have contributed to this. First, within that span of time, incomes have decreased by 8%, but at the same time, the amount of money it takes to actually rent a home went up by 20%. So as you can see, as our region continues to grow, the issue of affordable housing really is kind of like hitting us hard. There are a couple of reasons that I wanted to touch on about why affordable housing supply is such in short supply right now. So first of all, obviously there are many legal challenges that are happening right now. Is the concept of inclusionary zoning familiar to everybody? Yeah, so as you probably all know, many cities in the state of California have an inclusionary zoning ordinance, which means that anytime you build any sort of development, you're required to set aside a specific portion for affordable homes. So we have laws that actually allow us to do that, but those laws are being challenged right now in the Supreme Court. So what that means, while we're waiting for the California Supreme Court to rule, that means that all these cities that have inclusionary zoning ordinances on the books haven't actually been applying them. So we haven't been seeing any affordable. Yes?
There's a key word there. You said that it allows.
Yes.
Affordable housing.
It requires. I apologize.
There you go.
Yes.
That's the word I was looking for. But probably you meant to say.
No, you're absolutely right. Inclusionary zoning ordinances require the provision of a certain amount of affordable housing, and because of the legal challenges, all those ordinances are currently on hold. They're still in the books, but no cities are. I think it's safe to say that cities are not applying them, right? Okay. For rental portion, okay. Which actually is the most, which is the type of development that we've seen a lot of development happening. There isn't a lot of development that's been happening for sale homes. A lot of the development that's been happening is for rental, which means that we're losing out on a lot of opportunities to actually capitalize on that development. And as you probably are already aware, the biggest, whoa. Yeah, it's like, see, this is the biggest problem. as you all are aware, probably the biggest problem that we have right now really is there's no money. So at all levels of government, we've kind of like been hit hard for affordable housing. At the federal level, because of automatic budget cuts that happened in 2013, HUD lost the amount of funding they lost funding in an amount that would equal to 185,000 housing vouchers. So at the state level, at the state level, funds that we had, so Prop 46 and Prop 1C, that we used to draw down funds to actually build affordable housing, those funds are also almost depleted now. And then last but not the least, most recently, because of the dissolution of redevelopment agencies, we've lost that source of funding. So, but later on, and towards the end of the day, I'll talk a little bit about how we can recover some of that money that we lost for redevelopment. But by large, we've lost about $1 million across the state each year for affordable housing. So what that means for the Bay Area region is we've lost $250 million each year. So as you can see, under these very unhappy circumstances, kind of like we are actually, right now as a region, we're planning for more growth. Right? So one of our speakers this afternoon, Wayne Chen from the city of San Jose, I think he's going to touch a little bit on the housing element update process that's going on in San Jose. So the message that I did want to set was that these housing update element processes are going on across all of the region. So what you see here is only the share of affordable housing that cities with the major cities within Santa Clara County and San Mateo County have to plan for. But if you don't work in any of these cities, say for example, if you work in a city in Palo Alto, they also have a share of affordable housing that they need to plan for. So what this is only showing the cities that carry a really big bulk. So as you can see, just in Santa Clara and in San Mateo County, these cities need to plan for at least around 54,000. They need to plan to accommodate around 54,000 new homes. So there are a lot of planning processes that are happening right now that you can plug into your community.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
AMI?
So AMI means average median income. So these are the total number of units that are required. Say, for example, San Jose is required to do 35,000. That is actually broken up by affordability level. So there needs to be 9,000 units available to people who are making 50% of median income or less. There needs to be 5,000. Go ahead. Was there some other question? Oh. Yeah, so there are different affordability levels that cities need to plan for. Yeah.
I just wondered, is this report going to be available to
It is.
the website or something?
Yes, so they're actually recording the session right now, and so the audio would be available to everybody, and I believe they are going to be posting the PowerPoint presentations. I think that's the case. If not, I have business cards, and you can send me an email, and I will furnish you a set. Go ahead.
Do these figures take into account the number of units that are destroyed, or does it not matter and you have to build new ones no matter how many you destroy to that extent?
Well, in my understanding, what these numbers represent are these are the number of units that you need to plan for. Now, if one of your policy strategies is to actually replace the housing that's lost, that will count as part of the number that you're required to provide. Does that answer your question? So say, for example, there was a new development and you think that, and because of that new development, you expect that those 50 affordable units are going to disappear. Well, when your city plans for their housing element, they can have a policy that says developer must replace those units that are lost. And if they do that, then they can count those units.
Does anybody actually have such a policy? I've never heard.
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not sure.
It sounds like a
These
great
numbers,
policy.
though, are in addition to the existing. So it's accounting what's existing, and then this is how much more
You're right.
needs to be provided.
Right, there's no necessarily no net loss provision within that.
Yeah.
So if you're zoning for this, which is what it really is, but then you've lost units, that's a separate thing.
Good point. Okay, thank you. There was one more hand, and then, no? Yes?
guess the question I have is you mentioned San Mateo and Santa Clara County.
Yeah.
I only see one city up there, that's San Mateo.
Yeah.
Right?
So- Yeah.
So
So there's two answers to your question. What this chart is showing you is only showing you the numbers that are carrying the heaviest burden of the housing allocation. That does not mean that the cities that are not on this list don't have their own allocation. So I actually, if you're interested in seeing those numbers, I actually have a spreadsheet that lists down all allocations for all cities within 9 counties, and I can share that with you. So if you don't mind, I'm going to hold off all the other questions so that we can get to our other speakers, but at the end, please feel free to ask me. So anyway, in the context of this planning period that we're going on right now, I just wanted to also point out that when we're planning for, it's really important for us to do this planning process because, like as I mentioned earlier, rents have really been rising up really quickly, and this doesn't just affect the cities where rents actually increase. So say, for example, it's a real problem that rents are increasing in San Francisco or in Oakland, but what that really means is that that's not only hurtful for Oakland, that's actually, or San Francisco, that's actually hurtful for all the outlying communities, because a lot of people then are now migrating outside of the core and going to these outer communities like Tracy and Patterson and Los Banos and actually driving up rent prices there as well. So it's just to kind of give some context about why it's really important to act, not just at a local level, but at a regional level as well. Whoa, okay. So, okay. So at this point in time, I do want to say that after kind of like all that really bad news that I just delivered, that there are actually solutions, and there are actually really great people working on trying to solve this problem right now. So we've divided our kind of session into 3 major topics, basically the 3 components that we think are really important in order to get our housing numbers kind of balanced. And so first off, obviously, it's planning and policy. So speaking to planning and policy today, we have Wayne Chang, who is the Director of Policy and Planning for the San Jose Housing Department. And so Wayne is basically kind of like planning overlord for San Jose. He coordinates extensively, not with just other city agencies, but with external partners, such as Nonprofit Housing Association and different community groups. He works together with us so that we can get legislation and local and regional plans actually done right. So among his areas of responsibilities actually include the development of vibrant and equitable urban places like the Deer Dawn Station in San Jose, as well as their future urban villages strategies. So I did want to say that in addition to holding dual master's degrees in public policy and in urban planning, as you can probably tell, Wayne was once an extra in a TV series for a very big Asian superstar named Russell Wong. So if you don't know who Russell Wong is, after this session, Google him. And he worked with Wayne. So policy and planning is great. But at the end of the day, if we have plans that just sit on the shelf, then they're useless, right? What we need to do is we need to take those plans and we need to turn them into reality. Well, luckily today, you have someone who has experience in turning those things into reality. So I wanted to introduce Keri Lung. Keri is the Director of Housing Development at Mid-Peninsula Housing, which is a nonprofit affordable housing developer. Keri has a lot of experience, and so what she does is she leads a team of project managers at MidPen Housing through all the phases of development. So I guess if Wayne is the overlord of planning for San Jose, Keri is kind of like the overseer of all sorts of like affordable housing development. And while she has no showbiz experience, she does have real world experience. And I'm really excited to say that by working on 9 transit-oriented development projects throughout the region, she actually contributed to building 800 homes in Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda County. So it's awesome. And really, we all know that at the end of the day, we need policy, we need implementation, but in order to get all of these things done, you need political will. And the only way to get to political will is actually have a really engaged base of residents who are constantly pushing your decision makers to do the right thing. And as you probably can tell already now, I picked a really wonderful person to speak to that. We have Bena Chang, who is the Director of Housing and Transportation for the Silicon Valley Leadership Group. Bena has a ton of experience doing advocacy and policy work in Santa Clara County, and she's here today to discuss the different ways that we can actually build political will and to kind of give you a preview of the processes that you can tap into now at this point in time. Like Wayne, she has a little bit of experience in the entertainment industry. She was a radio program host for, what was the program called? Astrology and?
The astronomer and the librarian.
Very good.
Back in college.
So, see?
My roommate. Guess which one I am.
So with that, I'm very excited to hear the three of them speak, and I think I'm going to turn it over to Wayne.
So while I'm not sure if I want to be an overlord, I wouldn't mind starting a troupe in a performing group with Bena. Anyway, I want to thank Pilar and NPH for inviting me to this panel, and I want to thank the audience here for both sticking it till the end of the day and for spending such a nice day inside hearing about all of these important issues. So I've been asked to provide a public sector perspective on the challenges and opportunities of doing affordable housing really in these urban, transit-oriented areas. And I'm going to be focusing most of my conversation and discussion on the issue of urban villages in San Jose, and I'll go over that. So some of my points will be a little bit specific to San Jose, but I think the broad themes will be very relatable to city practitioners. But it will also have county-wide implications as well with what is going on with certain San Jose specific issues. I'd like to start by noting that the city has helped to facilitate the new construction of 15,000 affordable housing units since 1988. And of that, 90% of our affordable units are within 1/2 mile of either light rail or a bus stop. And we're very proud of that fact. However, when we talk about sort of the next, no, I'm good right there. Just gonna go back. When we talk about the next generation of urban places and affordability, what we're really talking about is a more coherent, sort of master planned vision of what a broader community could look like, as opposed to one-off, site-specific developments that we would call transit-oriented affordable, and you'll see a little bit more of what I'm talking about in just a second. That is why I'm starting with this very suburban image of San Jose, which is largely what San Jose is now, which is much like the image that Pilar started with on her PowerPoint presentation. This is the state of our world now. And what we're planning for is the future. Next slide. What I'm showing here is there are quite a bit of development opportunity in San Jose, but what I wanted to focus on were specifically transit-oriented development opportunities. If you were in a previous presentation, we were talking about building great places and walkability and urbanism, you might have seen certain themes about San Jose that I'm talking about here. We basically have 3 areas in San Jose that we're looking at for doing urban, walkable, vibrant, cool stuff. The first are urban villages, which is a series of 70 mixed-use infill parcels that are largely located on transit corridors near transit stations. This is one of the most important parts of our new general plan that was adopted by City Council in 2011, and walkability and urbanism is a key part of this. Downtown core, which includes Diridon Station, is a very key piece of the downtown opportunity. And then North San Jose, which is in blue, which is really our high-tech business area in San Jose. And we're trying to create a more urban, walkable, high-tech neighborhood really there. Next slide. What do these places look like? So let me take an urban village example. This is on South Bascom, if you're familiar with San Jose, between the 280 and Southwest Expressway. And this is the Dick Center, which is flanked here on the east side by a light rail station. And if we take a look at this, it's very typical of San Jose streets, and really I think of suburban streets. It's just really wide. It's a very dreary pedestrian experience. There's no crosswalks. It's very vacant and empty. And so just with the photo simulation, you've probably seen versions of this before, is you start to have development that are mixed use, residential on top supporting the local mom and pops. You have office, and what you're doing is adding an element of the built environment and urban design of bringing buildings up to the street so that you start to create a street wall and physical enclosures or using the built environment to create spatial enclosures so it feels much more comfortable for the urban experience. Next slide. And then you have elements of medians, streetscapes, really utilizing underutilized sites and reimagining the possibilities of what could be. We often hear folks say, places are built out. San Jose is built out. El Camino is built out. And a lot of that is just the way we've thought about development. None of these things are necessarily set in stone. The built environment that we have right now is a byproduct of policy, legislation, public finance system, and it's a byproduct of human action. And so what we're saying is, via human action, we can, after we envision another future that's perhaps better or more efficient or more equitable, we can start to set the wheels in motion to get there. Next slide. This would be an actual example of an affordable housing, transit-oriented development. This is close to San Jose Airport on Gish and First Street, and this is Gish Apartments. It's 13 units of extremely low income and 23 units of very low income. And by very low income, Pilar mentioned AMIs, area median incomes. Very low income for one person in the area is about $35,000. And so that's a working class job. It's a real job that pays a real wage. Next slide. This is what it looks like now, sort of from a slightly different angle. And it's mixed use. It's right across from light rail. It starts to fill in the space with something that's really quite nice. It's mixed use. It is a 7-Eleven, but it's a high-grossing 7-Eleven, and it really serves a population that really needs affordable housing, which is those most in need. So next slide. I wanted to spend just a moment on the policy context in San Jose because I think it's really key to understand what is happening in San Jose. And this is sort of the San Jose specific piece that I was talking about earlier. And it's this. Our general plan really emphasizes the jobs housing balance in its general plan. All of its land use, all of its urban village priorities is structured around the jobs housing balance. And let me explain that more. This is Santa Clara County, and let me hit it again. The county is jobs rich. So what that means is this. Based on a planning ratio that planners use, this is called the jobs to employed resident ratio. And for planners, it's, if you have a 1-to-1 ratio, you have balance. What it means is this. It's the number of jobs relative to the number of people who employed residents in a certain area. So the idea is this. If you have a 1-to-1 ratio, you have enough jobs for everyone who's an employed resident in the area to take a job in that area if they so chose to. That's very general. And so what this is showing is that there's really 14% more jobs than there are people who actually live and work here. Now the challenge is that in San Jose, we're jobs poor or housing rich. We have 0.85 jobs for every one employed resident. And what that's really caused is a reaction to how cities should be growing and how San Jose should grow. And San Jose must add more jobs to bring the balance up to at least a 1-to-1 ratio, but it's going to be higher, and I'll show you that in a second. Housing has therefore been identified as one of the key causes of San Jose's fiscal problems. Housing is a fiscal loser. We want jobs. We want tax revenue. And so that's really been the frame that's really pervaded our general plan for some understandable reasons, of course. Next slide. So we have this jobs first general plan. And so what this means is that the urban village is seen as an economic development tool. We want urban villages to create cool places so that businesses will come and young people will come and high-tech workers will come, and we'll have this amazing place and we'll have a much better budget situation. What we've been trying to do is to fully support our economic development objectives, understanding that it's absolutely key. However, we're trying to reframe this in a much more nuanced way that we feel actually truly captures the complexity of the situation, and we're trying to redefine the problem to actually get to the real problem. What I mean is this. You've heard that housing is a fiscal loser. What we would say is that the cost of housing is primarily due not to the land use, housing. It's primarily due to the form of the land use, sprawl. And it's the sprawl that is expensive, not necessarily the housing. Number two is that the housing that we're looking to build in the future will be dense. It will be compact. It will be urban. And there have been studies that show that urban and urban mixed use are positive fiscal generators. So we're not even talking about the types of housing that we've done. And we're trying to not let our past hold our future. So what that means is this, is that we're trying to say the hot housing market is not the cause for our weaker commercial market. What in fact we need to be doing is create these amazing urban, walkable, vibrant places. What does that mean? In every image that you've seen, there's always housing in the photo simulations. There's an understanding that housing must be part of creating great places. So there isn't a direct connection to say, because we do economic development, we hold back housing. What has been done is that the urban village has a set of processes that meter out housing through certain phases. However, commercial development can go at any point in time. And that is a real policy tension that we're trying to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. What we're trying to go is go from 0.85 jobs for each employee resident to 1.3 jobs for each employee resident. We want to completely flip the switch, and we want to go from jobs poor to very housing rich. Now, if we were to be successful at this, and if the county as a whole were to continue its pace of housing production, which is already housing poor, we will have an extremely housing poor county. And therein lies this regional equity issue is, will the job centers in Santa Clara County step up its effort and commitment towards adding housing, as well as adding the jobs that everyone wants? And that is one of the challenges that we're dealing with. The more that there's a regional effort, the more pressure it's taken off of San Jose, but we also think it also makes a lot of urban planning sense as well. Next. Some of the other challenges Pilar already mentioned is simply redevelopment funding was the primary source of funding for housing. We have challenges with the ability to require developers to include affordable housing on the site as part of their proposal, rental housing, because of legal challenges to that. And then there are declining state and federal resources. What I wanted to talk a little bit about, and it's a bit theoretical, but it pervades also the kinds of work and kinds of issues that we deal with in city government. And it's the institutional and systemic challenges that are very hard to change in the short term. It's very hard to mobilize around, but it completely structures what we are able to do. So the first one would be simply financial. Are there the lending products that allow us to borrow money to have risk capital come in and do mixed use, mixed income housing? The other is just the way the public finance system is structured. The second is really income inequality. And so the way you make housing more affordable is that housing is either cheaper or people can spend more money. And we have a tale of two valleys in Silicon Valley. We have the divided class, or an increasingly divided class. And the third is I wanted to talk about market forces. And it's the labor market produces incomes in jobs of a whole range. But the housing market itself only provides, by itself, typically, housing serving only a certain range. And so the housing market and the labor market, they don't talk. And there's a mismatch between the jobs that are produced and the housing that is produced. Oftentimes, when we go out to our listening sessions, it's, well, let the market take care of itself. Let the supply take care of it. However, without the willingness or the ability to think about it in terms of interconnected systems, if you deal with just the supply, you're not dealing with the ability to pay. It creates many challenges for even beginning the conversation, because it's not just a supply side issue, because the market itself probably won't address those most in need. And finally, insufficient coordinated response is that housing is a regional issue, but there's no regional mechanism to allow that to happen. There's no regional funding source. We need to have more coordination with the transit operators, with other public agencies as well. Next. In terms of creating an urban village, what's the next step forward? So part of that slide was a little bit bleak, but we are actually really excited about urban villages. We see a great opportunity. We see some challenges, yes, but we're really committed to creating these vibrant urban places. All you have to do is look at Santana Row, and whether you agree with its particular urban form and whatnot, what we can say is that it's extremely successful, and that the housing and the mix of uses there is creating more economic development. It's sort of a win-win. And we want to see more of that in different scales, in different types, in different areas throughout San Jose. The city has hired a consultant to help us work through the implementation and finance strategy of actually creating physical places that were in the red on the map. And the reason for that is we need to figure out how to finance the infrastructure to serve the urban villages. We need transportation infrastructure, we need sewer pipes, water, we need to get the right streetscape, all of those things. And we want to get affordable housing. Because the market is strong for housing, part of this discussion has been, how do we, even though we don't want housing necessarily, because we're housing rich, how do we, however, allow housing to go forward and value capture some of the benefits from allowing housing to go forward so that developers can pay for the infrastructure? And so what that does is create some challenges with who gets the scraps. Is it housing? Is it transportation? Is it public art? What is it? We're looking at tools such as business improvement districts, infrastructure finance districts, and other planning tools that allow us to capture back some of the values. So density bonuses, development agreements, rezoning. If you rezone and there's a huge bump in the value, how do you share in that increased value? Most of those tools right now have been talking about, when we capture back some value, how do we pay for the roads? How do we pay for the streets? It's not about affordable housing. Next. So what about affordability? So there is really no easy answer. There just really isn't. The city of San Jose is in the process of creating a housing impact fee. And the housing impact fee would be a fee charged to residential market rate developers on either a per square foot basis or on a per unit basis to pay into a pot of funds so that the city can then use to help finance affordable housing. Now, that would be a fantastic thing. When we're talking about affordable housing in transit-oriented development, there's two pieces. There's affordability and there's the location. And housing impact fees don't help necessarily with the location. So even if we get the fees, we may not be able to purchase the land in a transit-oriented area because the land is really expensive and we can be outbid by the market. So we need to deal with that. And so we're looking at the housing impact fee to perhaps address some of those issues. We're looking at talking about those planning tools that I mentioned before, whether part of that could include affordable housing, whether the value capture can help fund a little bit of that. We're trying to talk about fair housing and equitable development. We can't use the word inclusionary, but we think that if we have a strong community that's equitable, as Dr. Pastor was talking about today, that equity and efficiency are not mutually exclusive. Indeed, they're mutually supportive. How do we talk about inclusive communities through an equitable development framework that's legally defensible and that's practical and it's implementable? And we're struggling with that, but we're looking at different ways of dealing with it. And we need advanced partnerships with, again, transit agencies, other local agencies, and really how to look at this from a regional perspective because this is a regional issue. Next. We're looking at how to just lower development costs. You know, can the city actually create policies as part of our housing plans to really look at micro units? What does that look like? Can we have an ordinance? What about modular homes for affordability or modular homes for market rate affordable homes?
If I can interrupt, one of the other units during this workshop talked about urban villages, which you mentioned earlier. The concern would that be able to fold in really low-end or extremely low-income housing as part of the project to develop to use the lower development cost to include that?
That is exactly the process that we're working through right now. So your question is the one that we grapple with every day. Just as a quick example, We're very involved with the Diridon Station plan in San Jose, the transit station right across from SAP Center where the San Jose Sharks play. What we're able to write into the document so far is that the city has a policy goal of a minimum of 15% affordable units. Again, no mechanism. We have a goal.
Yeah.
But how do you hook that? How do you create the actual funding stream or the planning tool to get that to happen? So right now, we're feeling that we can use that kind of language. But that remains to be seen, and the next part is to get the mechanism.
Regarding affordability, East San Jose is more affordable than the rest of San Jose?
Yes.
Is there any room for urban villages over there?
There are a few. There's one on the major street leading into Alum Rock. And so Alum Rock itself is an urban village. There's East Santa Clara, which is an urban village. So that's just east of City Hall.
They already are urban villages. That's what you say, they're already urban villages.
These are designated in the red on the map as actual urban villages.
They are already, not to be planned anymore.
Under the urban village, the way I'm using it is the things that we are planning for. But so we don't have formal urban villages of the type that we're talking about right now.
So they're future, the idea is that these are plans for future.
But they already have stuff there. They're
Yes.
already working on
There's
stuff
good
there.
bones right there.
There are good bones. There are affordable homes that the city has helped provide, and with the help of nonprofit developers. What we're talking about is, as the city shifts and changes, can we continue to build on that and to really urbanize on a more community-wide scale instead of these sort of one-off developments? And so we're looking at how to do that. Preservation and anti-displacement policies, we're looking at that as well, is protecting the existing affordable stock. How do we do that? Is it a no net less policies to say if you wipe out the housing and you redevelop whatever you redevelop, you have to replace the units gone? We're looking at mobile home conversion ordinance. We have one right now, but there's a lot of concern with the mobile home park in Santana Row, which is part of an urban village. And so how do we address that? Do we strengthen the ordinance? What do we do?
What does the ordinance say?
There are certain provisions for relocation and for
I
compensation
want to get rid of it.
if you were to propose that as a developer. Acquiring land in key areas, but again, there's no money, so how do we do that? Do we partner? So we're following legislation and programs, which Bena will talk about. And again, framing the issue is very, very important. We need to continue to say that housing is key. Housing is not mutually exclusive of economic development, and then actually get the tools in place. And that really is one of the big challenges that we have. We want to support economic development, but we want to support great placemaking, which includes housing. So all of this is going to our housing element that Pilar was mentioned, and that's a planning a report that all cities must do. We're in the midst of that. If you're interested, look at the cities that you live in and see what kind of processes they have if you want to be involved and to help shape the dialogue and policies in your respective cities. So.
Thank you, Wayne. I do want to also say that if you do want to get involved in the housing element update process in your city, NPH is tracking and monitoring as much as we can all the processes around the 9-county Bay Area. So if you shoot me an email, I can share whatever information we currently have for your city with you. And yeah.
When we signed up for this class, will you automatically get emails?
I do not think so. I think I have a bunch of business cards here for people, yeah. Thank you so much, Wayne. With that, I wonder if Keri would be willing to talk to us about how to actually get some of these projects implemented.
Hi, I'm Keri Lung, and you can go to the next slide. I'm going to try to be fast because I think we want to leave plenty of time for questions and dialogue. So I represent MidPen Housing. We were founded in 1970 through a collaboration of Stanford University faculty and local, mostly Palo Alto business people who predicted that affordable housing was going to be a major issue, and here we are today, and it's still a major issue. MidPen is one of the nation's largest nonprofit developers of affordable housing, and although we work in 11 counties, the vast majority of our properties are here in Santa Clara and San Mateo County. Next. So how does locating housing near transit benefit lower income residents? Well, some really obvious reasons why you would want to locate the housing near transit for our residents. It gives them access to jobs, it reduces their car ownership, which makes their lives more affordable. And also for us building the housing, if we're able to build fewer parking spaces, parking is incredibly expensive, then we can build more housing if it's located near transit. But people often ask us, well, what is it really like for the residents who live on these really busy transit corridors? Is that a great place for families to live? And I think what people don't often realize is that in our communities, because the residents spend so much less time commuting, they get to spend a lot more time with their families. They get to work on improving their lives. We have a lot of service programs for the adults and how to manage their lives better and move on to better jobs. And they also can participate more in the community, so it makes them for a much healthier, sustainable community. Also, though, what people often don't realize is that through thoughtful design, housing near these busy transit corridors can actually be very attractive, safe, quiet, and very livable. And so I'm hoping to show you that with a few pictures here. So this is our actually the densest family housing project we have built recently. It's right next to the Union City BART station. So 157 units for families, 72 units per acre, is very dense, and the majority of the units are 2 and 3 bedrooms. So actually we have predominantly larger families that can house maybe 5 to 7 people in a unit, and we've really kept the parking down very low. In a sort of suburban location, one car for a family that large we feel is really pushing the envelope. There's also 10,000 square feet of retail in this property, and let's actually go to the next slide. This is part of a large master planning effort, and the reason I included this example is to give you an idea of how sometimes difficult it is to build transit-oriented housing. This project took a very long time to get going. This is the current master plan, but there have been several iterations of master plans for this site. So right now, this is the BART station, and everything on this side, which is the west side of the station, has been developed. Because the BART actually opens up this way. The BART currently does not yet open to the east side. What's in green has been developed, and everything else is still in the planning stages. And what's key to the planning stage is getting a pedestrian crossing of the tracks. But MidPen's housing is here, and next to it are single-family homes that were developed. And then in the next phase will be some market rate housing. And then all the rest of this is still to come. Go to the next slide. So this is what the site looked like before. It was mostly PG&E owned storage yards and lots of toxics on the site. And it took the redevelopment agency in Union City over a decade to assemble all the parcels, clean up the site, and come up with plans for developing it. Then it took many more years trying to get developers interested in doing the master development. Finally, in 2007, we were partnered with a market rate developer through an inclusionary housing requirement that we were going to provide the affordable housing, and there would be as much as 1,000 units of housing on the site. Then the 2008 crash came, and that market rate developer backed out. But fortunately for us, there were transit-oriented development funds that were made available through Proposition 1C at the state level, and those funds allowed us to reconfigure the project and get the affordable housing going, at least, as a catalyst to trying to keep the whole project going. Next slide. And this is a picture of what it looks like today. So you can see again the BART station and everything on the west side has been developed. This is our project, and those are the single-family homes. And we understand that the pedestrian bridge is going to start construction maybe this year. So pretty exciting. Next slide. This layout of the site shows you how densely we plan this development. So this is, the BART station is here. This is the 10,000 square feet of retail facing the BART station. And this is one of the first challenges we have, is, as Wayne mentioned, urban villages, walkable communities, everybody wants to see pedestrian-oriented, transit-oriented development. But the problem is we're often going into areas where there aren't the customers for the retail. And in particular here, because the pedestrian bridge has not been created yet, getting the retail leased up has been a challenge. So we're finding that we're actually having to subsidize, affordable housing development is actually subsidizing retail development, which makes it even more expensive to build. So we have housing above the retail, and then behind it, we have a courtyard with our common areas, you know, tot lots and play areas for the kids. We actually have a swimming pool, and then we have more housing wrapped around a garage, which is a shared garage. It's the parking for the residents as well as a public parking garage for what will eventually be the hordes of retail customers coming in the area. Next. So this just kind of outlines the different objectives that we in the city had for the development. I think we can go to the next one. So closer to home, I wanted to talk about what transit-oriented development looks like in areas where the transit is not so good as a BART station. So this is our project opened in 2010 called Peninsula Station. It's right across from the Hillsdale Mall on El Camino, right just north of what was the Borders bookstore. And right behind us, a little bit further south, is the Hillsdale train station. So we're sandwiched in between, you know, buses on El Camino and the train station behind. We do find, however, that in San Mateo County, we can't get the parking down quite as low because our residents still do need to drive. They can't rely on the bus, and Caltrain is quite expensive. So although we are pushing transit, and our parking ratio is still lower than market rate developments, it's not as low as we would like. And we do have to provide parking for the retail. The retail on El Camino, again, what we're calling aspirational retail. There's not a lot of foot traffic there yet. And so the retailers still are relying on people to come in cars, and without having a big open parking lot in front of the retail, it's hard for them to stay in business. And of course, those parking spaces cost us money. Let me see. One thing that's interesting about this project, though, is to push the transit, we are providing every resident over the age of 5 a free bus pass. And we're participating in a study with Transform and some other partners to try to figure out, well, how is that working? Unfortunately, even though the bus passes are free, we're finding only about half of our residents use them, and it's mostly the kids. So again, the question is, you know, is the Samtrans, you know, where they go and how frequently they go, is that going to be viable for the residents to give up their cars altogether or not? And that's one of the challenges. In Santa Clara, I have to say, we're more encouraged because the VTA passes there are intermodal, so they can use the passes on the light rail as well. And so, you know, hopefully that will be better. But something that we're all going to need to keep working on. Next. So this shows you again how what we've done to make the living in these high-density communities very attractive. In fact, everybody who comes to visit our property is just amazed by how, when you get behind the street facade into our courtyard area, how quiet and tranquil it really is. So this is El Camino, and these are the retail spaces, and then behind it we have interior community space, which I'll show you a picture of next, and then quite a bit of outdoor community space, including tot lot for the kids. And because the massing of the housing here and in the back against the railroad tracks protects the interior from noise and wind, it's actually a very pleasant living environment. Next picture. So this just shows you kind of the variety of spaces that we've planned, both interior and exterior. And key also to making our communities livable is we provide a lot of services on site. So we have an after-school program for the kids, computer labs for both kids and adults to learn in, and fitness center as well as outdoor play areas. Okay, next. Oh, I was just going to say, one of the advantages of having higher density housing is that we get a critical mass of residents so that we can more efficiently provide these kinds of services, and they're really community building services as well. This is one of our older transit-oriented developments. It was opened in 1997 in downtown Redwood City. Many of you might recognize this building. That other corner of it is Milagros Restaurant. This is Donato's. So we're right across from the library and next to City Hall in Redwood City. Probably one of the, if not the first housing developments in downtown Redwood City. So it was at a time when the city was trying to kick off a renaissance. Now, of course, they've achieved that, and there's a lot of new market rate housing going into downtown. But we often are in the position as affordable housing developers of being the catalyst, kind of bringing, proving that it's okay to have housing in areas where people don't envision housing. The retail, however, was very challenged. It probably was not viable for about at least 10 years. Now it's doing quite well, but again, it's one of those challenges with the urban village concept. This is just another picture of the interior of the building, how we have courtyards for the kids to play in, and again, we've learned that having program activities for the kids is really important when you're in a downtown location. As a result, if you survey the businesses near us, they all say that we're a great neighbor. They don't have a problem with, kids loitering around and that kind of thing, and our kids are safe even though they're living in a downtown environment. Next. Higher density housing is also great for seniors. As I think a lot of you know, studies are showing that seniors will live longer and healthier if they're in walkable communities. This is a project that we developed in Milpitas as part of a master plan community where the senior housing here is right across the courtyard from the county health clinic. So they can get their medical services there, and then right across the street from a public library and along a major bus line. And one of the kind of neat things is we're finding that our seniors are hanging out at the library, and they've become the favorite tutors for kids who go there doing their homework. So it's a pretty neat urban village concept. Next.
Yeah, you mentioned the historic area that you incorporated in that.
The historic building, yes. I know, I'm trying to go fast. But yes, we incorporated a historic building, and it's the community center, and we share it with the city, so we have community events there. This is our newest Grand Boulevard project. So when we're building on the El Camino, we're trying to actively participate in the Grand Boulevard vision. This is in South San Francisco, and again with a retail on the ground floor, which has been challenging for us to lease up. I would say one of the good things, though, about us providing retail at the ground level is, first of all, we don't want our residents living on the first floor of El Camino anyway. So we need to do something with that space. What we're finding is that when we are able to lease it up, sometimes we're tending to lease it more to businesses that have kind of grown up in the neighborhood and are getting priced out of other areas. So again, if we can find a way to afford to build it, I think that there's a nice synergy between our housing and helping neighborhood businesses as well. But the reason I put this one up is to show you that our higher density housing on transit corridors often serves as a nice transition too. So the front of the building in El Camino is very tall and commercial looking, and then it provides that kind of buffer zone for our residents. But in the back, we're up against single family homes and apartments, and so we step down to townhouses, and I think that that's a pretty common situation along El Camino. So next. Okay, this is the real pitch, right? So what are our biggest challenges? Well, obviously, as Wayne mentioned, the high land costs. Unfortunately, transit-oriented development has become popular for market rate developers as well, and so the sites have become exorbitantly expensive now. The cost of parking also, because we do have to provide some parking, because it's structured parking, is quite expensive. And then, as I mentioned before, we're usually covering the cost of the retail because it can't pay for itself. And then the retailers want parking in order to be viable. I think that one thing to remember is that it costs just as much to build affordable housing as it costs to build market rate housing. The only problem is that we collect about a third of the revenue that market rate developers collect. So for example, the most recent transit-oriented projects we developed in San Mateo County, including some of the Grand Boulevard ones you saw, the average price per unit is about $450,000. And of that, about $50,000 to $80,000 was just the land cost. And today, I would argue, especially down here, the land costs are even higher. So that's really daunting. And compared to that, the income the rental income we collect can cover only about $50,000 of those costs. So about 11% of the cost. So how do we pay for this housing? Well, the vast majority of our costs are covered by federally subsidized tax credits. We sell these tax credits to investors, and that gives us about 50 to 60% of our costs. That covers 50 to 60%. The problem with the federal tax credits is that they're very hard to come by. The credits are allocated to each state based on the number of residents in the state, and we don't get nearly enough in California for the demand that we have for them. But then the balance of the cost, about 30 to 40% of the costs, have historically come from state and local government sources, and in particular the redevelopment agencies, like San Jose Redevelopment Agency. So now that the redevelopment agencies have been dissolved, there's a huge funding gap left for us. And I guess that's my transition to Bena, who's going to talk to us about what we can do to hopefully mitigate that problem.